My name is Matt, and welcome to episode 9 of Small Talk Tech, the podcast interview series where I look to uncover more similarities than differences in what makes people in tech tick. Tara Hackley joins us, and we go over how practicality and discipline led her into the wild world of tech. We also go over her thoughts on Cambridge Analytica and what the heck BookTube is. The next episode of Small Talk Tech starts now.
So my name is Tara Hackley. Right now, my title is a software engineer, and I work for a small startup that makes software for other startups. And I became a developer kind of after I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for is, but it wasn't like a direct, like kind of clear path for me. It was something that I just kind of fell into after kind of some different circumstances that I was in. Like I originally had a job out of college doing support for a technology company. So that's where I got like introduced to development, like in a professional sense. After that, I did kind of like QA and product management stuff. And then after that, that's when I became a developer.
You actually graduated from college with a bachelor's degree in English, majoring in creative writing. So I'm sure while at the time you really didn't have a clue of where you'd end up now, have you found what you've learned during that time sort of bleeding over into programming at all?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because I think what a lot of people miss is that like it is incredibly important, although it doesn't go along with the stereotype of developer. Like soft skills are incredibly important. Communicating effectively is important. Thinking outside of the box and being creative in your thinking is important. Just kind of like those more like soft skills that necessarily aren't associated with programmers.
Do you find that having some sort of creative mind tends to give you a leg up on other developers? Maybe someone who's more overall technically minded, not that it's a competition. I mean, I guess you could say everything in life is a competition at some point, but at least for me, I find that I feel like I tend to sometimes view technical issues maybe in a different light. I don't know if that's just me being really pretentious or if that's something you might end up, feel yourself.
Yeah, I would definitely say it gives me a different perspective. And I have definitely heard from people, that I've like either job interviews I've gone on, people who are interviewing me, and like even the company I work for now, one thing they talked about specifically was like kind of my perspective on programming. And I think not coming from a technical background, it gives me like a more well-rounded picture, especially like having previously done product management, QA, and support. It gives me a more well-rounded picture. I like to know more about the things that I'm working on. It's not like someone just gives me a story or a feature to develop and then I just go straight into it. I'm thinking about like, what is the point of this feature? Do we actually need it? Is there a better way that I could be accomplishing the same issue that someone's having? So I think in that aspect, I definitely have. And then as far as like creativity, I can't think of a way that like my creative writing degree or / English degree, if you want to call it that, gives me a leg up on anyone. I would say my communication is a lot better than other developers that I have worked with. But, that could be completely unrelated to my English degree.
Was there any kind of one singular moment or something that happened along the way that made you kind of want to shift and pivot a bit and go into a completely different field than what you studied?
Yeah, so let me kind of give you the whole backstory. So I originally went to college to be a civil engineering major and get, a job as a civil engineer after college. Changed my major senior year. So I did that whole thing, which was an experience. And then after that, I thought I wanted to work in publishing, like making books and kind of things like that. And I still definitely like want to, because one of my main goals in life is to be an author. So I still have that goal. And creative writing definitely helped me in that aspect. But since I thought I wanted to work in publishing, I was like, okay, that's kind of my next step. But I also live in the Midwest. And there was no way that I could afford to, move out to like New York City where a lot of publishing is. So it was just kind of like the circumstances of where I was in life, like what I could afford, what I couldn't afford. And that's kind of honestly just how I fell into technology. It was a job that was available to me at the time to work support.
Definitely more of a decision made with your brain rather than your heart. So that seemed like it was a very tactical move on your part. Did that come kind of easy to you, or did you have a lot of sleepless nights going, am I really making the right choice? Should I follow my passion even though it's not even remotely feasible at this time?
It was not one of those sleepless night situations. It was very much like, this is kind of what I need to do. Because like at this point, my bank account had hit zero. I had no money and I needed, like benefits and stuff. So it was a very practical, like decision oriented. I need XYZ. This job will give me XYZ.
Was it something that you kind of always maybe had an ancillary interest in, or during your time in that first sort of technically based job that it ended up, snowballing and snowballing to where you got to now?
Yeah, it was definitely kind of a snowball effect, all kicked off by the fact that it was something that I was interested in. And what's interesting is like growing up, I was always on the computer. I ran forums and websites and messed around with HTML and CSS. But like, it didn't occur to me that that was a thing I could do professionally, like that was a career option. But it was always something just like kind of in the back of my mind, just for like my own personal endeavors that I wanted to pursue to learn how to code. But then, being around the people that I was around, like a lot of my friends I made were at that first job that I had, and they were all developers. It was just like a really good environment. Like I enjoyed the people I was working with. They all happened to do this development job and be in the tech space. So it was just kind of the stars kind of aligned. There were just so many things that kind of aligned perfectly that's really sparked my interest in it.
You actually wrote a Medium article titled Unemployed to Full-Time Developer in 6 Months. So in that article, you mentioned that you had convinced yourself on multiple occasions that you had absolutely no business in trying to be a programmer and suffered from a heavy case of imposter syndrome and even feeling that your future was riding on your ability to learn how to code. Would you consider falling into that your quote unquote rock bottom moment?
Oh my gosh. I think like mentally, I would definitely consider that kind of my rock bottom moment. Because at this point, like as the article points out, like I'm unemployed. I think it's important to note that I had chose to be unemployed. It wasn't like I'd been let go or anything. Like I had chosen to leave my previous job. But yeah, mentally, it just, I don't know if I can curse on here, but it kicked my ass.
No, that's fine.
It was exhausting. And it was just, I don't know, it was a really hard time for me because like you pointed out, I felt like my future was riding on this. Like I felt like financially, I was in an okay place and I could sustain not being employed for a while. If development didn't work out, I didn't know what I was going to do. So it felt like all of my eggs were kind of in this one basket and I couldn't get myself to like get into the basket, I guess.
I honestly can't even fathom being in that kind of situation. How did you end up mentally, emotionally overcome what probably seemed like something that was a completely insurmountable mountain in front of you at the time? Like, did you have any sort of books you read or, maybe motivational type things you listened to?
No, I didn't have any books I read or any kind of like motivational things. It was really just more so like my discipline because I had noticed, small improvements in my coding ability. And so what also really kind of helped me keep going was the fact that my partner is a developer. He went to school, got a computer science degree, and he programs. And what really kind of like helped me was he was like, Tara, I went to school for 4 years to be able to do this. You're trying to do this in like a couple months, like give yourself a break. So that like really helped me kind of mentally. Of course, it was hard at the time to like kind of internalize that, but it also just like really helped to think about like there are people who go to school for 4 years to do this, and I'm trying to accomplish the same thing in a few months.
Do you ever kind of call back to those days when you were feeling, some bits of imposter syndrome? I'm sure even now, I've interviewed 8 people before this too, and all of them at varying levels have also had their own fair share of imposter syndrome. Do you still feel like you get that, or do you feel like that you've kind of climbed that mountain and overcome that initial challenge that you don't really find yourself feeling those types of feelings anymore?
To this point, I haven't really felt those feelings, or at least to the same degree that I have felt them in the past. And that's just because, like, mentally, I've kind of gotten to the place, well, hey, Tara, you didn't think you could do it, and then you did it. And that's kind of where I am now, like, in terms of my job. Like, I don't think I can do these things, but then I end up doing them anyway. And that's been, like, really helpful because I definitely haven't been as low as I was when I was learning to code. And, of course, having... this sounds kind of weird, but like having some kind of external validation that, hey, I accomplished something, because, if I didn't have these skills, I wouldn't be employed as a developer.
Right.
So definitely that kind of like someone else is willing to hire and pay me for it helped validate me a little bit. That sounds pretty shallow, but it's the truth.
No, that's especially hearing from where you started out of your humble beginnings too. Like that must have been such a vindicated feeling when you got that letter of acceptance into your new job.
Oh man, it was, because it was, I think I even touched on this in my, that Medium article I wrote, was like that week when I was doing the take-home coding exam, that was another really low week for me mentally. Like I was crying multiple times throughout that week. Like I felt like I had no idea what I was doing. I felt like I was completely out of my depth, but I was able to finish the project and then they offered me a job. Like I genuinely didn't think I was going to get that job,
wow.
But I did.
It seems like a recurring theme is discipline. How have you kind of cultivated that in yourself?
I guess because like I think it's important for me to point out like I'm not disciplined in all aspects of my life. Like there are things that I procrastinate on, like cleaning my apartment, for example.
Ditto.
Not disciplined when it comes to that. But I think I have definitely always been kind of disciplined when it comes to like academics and career. I view my career kind of as an extension of academics. So like I was always kind of like goal oriented in my academics. I was always disciplined. Unlike coding, academics kind of came easily to me. So it was more easy for me to be disciplined when it came to those things. But it was just kind of like a continuation of being disciplined from, schooling, for being in school for however many years, 16 years. So for me, it was honestly just an extension. And it really helped that I was aiming for like a concrete thing. Like I was aiming for something that was achievable. Like I was aiming for like a job. Like that's what I was going towards. So it was really easy to kind of like, even though mentally it was exhausting, it was one of these things where it was like, I'm trying to achieve this thing and I can't get this thing unless I do all of these other things first. And that can be definitely kind of overwhelming because I felt overwhelmed so many times. But it was really just, I was trying to achieve something and I knew I couldn't get it unless I was disciplined and continued, to keep coding, even though I felt like I sucked at it.
Going to college, going through the school system can definitely temper the right people to form them into, like yourself, how you're just super disciplined. And it's awesome. I don't have anything else to really say.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just, I don't know what it is about like my career, but I take it kind of like very seriously. Like I'm a very kind of outgoing and like chill, relaxed person when I am working, but I also take it really seriously. And I think a lot of that just comes from the family that I grew up in. Like I'm from a very working class family. For the most part of my life, I was raised by a single mom. She had an incredible work ethic. My grandma has an incredible work ethic. My family in general just has an incredible work ethic. So I think that also was kind of instilled in me. I don't know, maybe I was born with it, but I also think it was just like instilled with me.
Especially coming, like, I don't want to say from adversity, but obviously it's not like you had the nuclear family. I feel like people who have kind of grown up in those situations, when they do get into quote unquote the real world and have to adult, they tend to be, a much more overall successful adult than someone, who might have been a little coddled more or silver spoon in their mouth. So I could easily see that was where it was instilled from.
Which is, sorry, this is kind of tangential, which I think is a little bit funny. So I was raised most of my life by a single mother, but there was a short period in my life where my mom was married. And my stepdad, who I'm still close to now, even though they were married back when I was in elementary school, he never thought that I had a good work ethic because my mom, she didn't like force me to have a job while I was in high school or anything. I didn't have a job in high school. I had a job in college, but it was work study. So it was part of like how I afforded to be able to go to college was through the work study program. And so my stepdad just had never seen me like in a professional sense. But I still think even to this day, he has no idea like of the work ethic I have. He knows that, I was unemployed, that I chose to be unemployed. And he thinks that's so millennial of me, like, just kind of looking down his nose a little bit at me for choosing to go about my life that way. But yeah, sorry. I just thought it was funny because like my stepdad has no idea like the work ethic that I have. And it sounds a little bit boasty of myself, I'm sure. But just like it's something that I am really proud and happy of myself to have.
You've actually recently said that you don't code outside of work.
Yes.
Do you feel like that there's some sort of unspoken pressure in the industry that makes people feel like they need to be coding or working on their project or doing their side hustle 24/7, 365?
Yeah, I feel that like from so many kind of different areas of the programming community. I don't know what it is. I know for sure some of it is just kind of comes from myself, like this pressure that I feel like other people are putting on me, but they're not actually putting on me. It's just like this pressure I perceive to have for some reason. But I just feel like, I don't know what it is. I think in the technology space, especially, there's this kind of follow your passions, do what you're passionate about, kind of devote your life to your passions rhetoric that I find a little bit unhealthy. And I think that kind of stems down into developers doing their passion, doing it all the time. And so there's kind of like that pressure, I feel like, that kind of rhetoric around it. I feel like potentially unpopular opinion here, but I feel like some of it can kind of come from Instagrammers, developers who are on Instagram, just through like different kind of, I don't want to like say names or anything, but just like things that I've seen people say or questions I've seen people ask. It kind of, to me, gives off this perception of you're not a real developer if you don't, do X, Y, or Z, if you don't have, tons of projects on your GitHub, or if you don't have open source projects that you contribute to. And then I also just think it's also part of this kind of like people outside of developers don't really know what developers do. So there's this kind of mystique around it, which I think kind of also contributes a little bit to this idea that, you know, coders should code all the time.
Yeah, they're wizards pretty much. I mean, to the outside, you know, people outside the industry, it's like they hit a few keystrokes and suddenly Facebook's made.
Yeah.
But I totally agree with the Instagram point, because I touched on this a little bit in a previous episode. I think it was 4 with Micah, but I definitely feel that.
Micah.
Yeah, shout outs to Micah.
Yes.
I definitely feel that in stories, because it is similar to Snapchat, people tend to be a bit more honest and real through that because it is temporary. Air quotes temporary, because I mean nothing's temporary on the internet. It is there forever if someone saves it, or God knows where it ends up. But in actual posts, I definitely feel like there's, you know, almost a digital veil people that put on, that they feel like they have to be posting something like when they're looking their best, like when they're working. And I think there's kind of a fine line between cataloging your progress and trying to, I don't want to say fish for likes, or fish for attention, because I don't think that's exactly one-to-one. But I feel like there are some people who tend to fake it a little bit and only show the best version of what they're at, versus showing the real struggle, you know, like you were so great to do in your article saying that, you know, you broke down crying. I'm sure there's 90% of the people on Instagram wouldn't post a post or even mention anything like that would show any sort of sign of humility or weakness, or showing that they're actually a real person.
Yeah. And, you know, I think like I have a very complex kind of relationship with how I think about that. Because like on the one hand, you know, it's like your social media profile, do with it like what you will, like that's totally up to you.
Yeah.
But then it's also like, I can't think of the studies that have been done, but I know there have been like some articles kind of written about how social media can contribute to like negative self-worth, negative mental health.
I believe
just
it.
because like you're seeing someone's highlight reel, you know? And I just like, for me personally, like I always knew like if I ever had any sort of platform, I wanted to be as transparent and open as possible. Of course, there are things, you know, that are really personal that I would, you know, keep to myself, because it's really no one else's business unless I choose to share it.
Right.
But like documenting like my programming journey and kind of things I do as a programmer, it was really important to me to be like as transparent as possible. Of course, you know, maybe there are things I can't remember, or maybe I have like rose tinted glasses on sometimes reflecting on things, but I didn't want to create a false perception of like what it took for me to get where I am. Of course, there are people, you know, who have harder circumstances. I could afford to be unemployed while I was learning to program. Right. A lot of people cannot afford that. But I've always wanted to be like as transparent as I possibly can, because this is hard and I want to like take down that veil of mystique. I want to eliminate some of this kind of like unknown that people feel like goes into programming.
I hope further on into the future, like I guess dating the podcast a bit, but you know, the whole like Cambridge Analytica thing, I feel like there's going to be a time to where people are going to be exposed to who they really are versus who they think their persona of themselves are on the internet. And I feel like until it gets to that point, this is kind of going to be a consistent problem until a huge shitstorm or anything like that happens. At least, you know, me and my soapbox of a podcast right now, that's how I feel.
No, I totally agree. Because like, again, so like this is kind of one of those like, I choose how I kind of portray myself on Instagram. I think, you know, my Instagram is me, but you only see like part of me. You see like one picture of me, right, like maybe once a week or something like that. And whatever I'm thinking of at that particular moment. But like, there was so much that I wanted to say about the Cambridge Analytica thing, but I also have received DMs telling me that I'm like virtue signaling and things like that. So I try to be aware of like how I'm coming across, but like there's just so many things that I wanted to say, because it's like, that's part of the veil of like programming and data science and all of that, is like people don't really understand what's happening until it's too late. And it was also one of those things where it's like, I'm really against this kind of idolization of Silicon Valley / technology founders. So like Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk. Again, like you pointed out, we're all people. We are all motivated by different things. Many of us are selfish, myself included. There are things that I'm selfish about.
And that's okay.
People are greedy, and there's nothing like inherently wrong with these things. But when it's like at the magnitude of like Facebook, that's a problem, because, oh my gosh, we're going to get into like slightly political here. So excuse me for a moment.
No, that's totally fine.
But like that Cambridge Analytica stuff, that's psychological warfare. Like that's just harnessing in on kind of like the worst parts of humanity and using that to their advantage. and just like the ads that they run and the things that they say, and things like that. And it's just like, I don't know. That's why I'm so anti this idolization, because sometimes, like in Mark Zuckerberg's case, his hands aren't literally on everything in Facebook, but he's still like, CEO or whatever his official title is of Facebook. He's still responsible for it. And it's just, I don't know. Sorry, that was a tangent, but it's one of those things I think it gets me.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's a much needed tangent. Could you please describe the first 90 minutes of your day being as specific as possible? So, for instance, if you wake up early, what time do you wake up? If you drink coffee, what kind do you drink? So on and so forth.
So usually, it depends on the day, because I do take like a kickboxing class a couple days a week.
Yeah, full disclosure too. This is a perfect day. Like, the sun's shining. Okay. Like, you weren't up until 2 a.m. working on an issue, fixing it. Like, this is perfect, ideal conditions of what you would do.
So a perfect day would be, I would get up between 7 and 7:30. The first thing I do as soon as I wake up is feed my dog. And then after that, I just get ready for the day. Sometimes that involves a shower. Sometimes it doesn't, because I can't wash my hair every day. That would ruin it. And then after that, get dressed. Nothing too fancy. I'm a jeans and t-shirt person, so I just throw on whatever I feel compelled to wear that day. Then I walk my dog. And then after that, I will eat breakfast. I have the same breakfast every Monday through Friday. It's overnight oats, which I prepare usually the night before. But it's just oatmeal, almond milk, chia seeds, and usually peanut butter, sometimes almond butter. Eat that. It's delicious, let me tell you. I eat that with fruit that I have. And then usually I spend probably 30 minutes to an hour watching television. That's when I get my TV time is in the morning, because I don't have to be at work till 10 a.m. So usually I'll have my dog walked between 8:15, eat my breakfast, and then I'll catch up on a reality show usually, then go to work. And on my way to work, usually grab a coffee. As soon as I'm in the office, usually get right down to work. Occasionally we'll have a stand-up, but there's only 5 of us at the company, so there's not too much to report.
Reality shows.
Yes.
What's your current go-to? Because I don't really much anymore, because I don't really watch cable, but there definitely are a couple of Netflix series that I'll watch now and then if I'm really feeling like the reality show junk food mood.
Yeah, so my particular brand of reality television is MTV reality shows. Right now, MTV started this new series called X on the Beach. I'm really enjoying that. It's kind of the rundown of the show is it's usually other people on MTV who've been popular through other reality shows, because MTV has so many, come on there, and then their ex-significant other shows up. Nonsense ensues.
Take that, Infinity War. This is the most ambitious crossover ever.
Oh, man, it is. So it has people from other MTV reality shows. It has like social media people. There are people from like Big Brother. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but people from Big Brother are on there. And there are some people from Bad Girls Club on there. I used to watch that. I don't watch that anymore. But yeah, and then that one's a new one. So that's a new series that I watch. I'm a Jersey Shore person. I love Jersey Shore.
GTL.
Yes. Chicken laundry, let's go. And then kind of like the MTV basics / staples for me are the Real World. It seems like they're not doing any more Real World, so that one might be completely over. But there's that crossover challenge show where it's people from like the Real World and other MTV reality shows compete against each other. And then what's the other one? The other one is Are You the One, which is probably my favorite, which is just like, how many people is? I think it's like 20 attractive 20-something individuals who have to find their perfect match, quote unquote. And it's nonsense, but it's so enjoyable.
Like I said, I don't really watch too much reality anymore, just for not having cable. But there is one on Netflix that I love and I need to catch up on. That's called Terrace House. I don't know if you've heard of this or not.
I've heard of that, and I'm probably honestly going to start watching that after this.
So for listeners who might not know, it's essentially if you took Big Brother or one of those style house shows where there's a bunch of people living in a house, but transplanted in Japan with all of the, social norms there too. So like it is anti-raunchy. Like the biggest argument that people get into is, who's going to clean the dishes. It takes about 7 episodes for the first couple to hold hands, and I love it. It's a complete joy to watch.
I'm so excited for this show. I have to watch that.
Yeah, I would start from the beginning. I think the first one is called Terrace House in the City, but they have like this beautiful like Japanese like mansion in Tokyo. And the second one is like Aloha State, where they also go to Hawaii because there's a lot of transplants, back and forth between Japan and Hawaii because obviously they're pretty close together. And then the newest one is I think they're out in like a cabin in the woods. I'm still on the second one of them being in Hawaii, but I know there is overlap with previous cast members. So if you're listening and you want to start, I would start from the city one. And the theme song is amazing. And I guess in Japan, they use Taylor Swift for the actual intro, but in the US, it has its own weird intro, but I like that one way more and catch myself humming it all the time. And yeah, it's just great. I can't praise that show enough. So kind of cheating a bit because we did talk about that, but what's something you're obsessed with?
Okay, so we're getting like intimate details of my life. Not really. There is this community on YouTube called BookTube, and it's just people who talk about books. So books they're reading, books they've bought, things like that. I'm obsessed with it. I enjoy reading. I haven't read as much this year as I normally do, but it's just like a really great like love of books community that I really enjoy. Like I would say probably 95% of the people I subscribe to on YouTube make videos about books.
Oh, wow. That's interesting to know that there is book YouTubers. I had no idea that was like a subculture that existed on there.
Oh, yeah, it's really big. So I only speak one language. I speak English. So there are like the English speaking booktubers. So like usually like Canada, the US, the UK, and Australia, I think are the main ones for English speaking. But there's also like kind of a subculture of BookTube who are, I think they're Spanish speaking booktubers. So that is like its own culture and its own thing. I haven't watched it because I don't understand Spanish, unfortunately, but I've definitely seen a video or two, and it's just like, I think YouTube is so interesting in these different subcultures, and I think it's so cool.
Who's the king of the BookTube world if someone listening wanted to go check it out? Who's your number one recommendation?
My favorite is Books and Lala. She's a Canadian booktuber. She has very similar taste to books than I do, but she reads more thrillers than I do. I'm a wimp. I don't like to be scared, but she reads a lot of contemporary young adult books, which is what I read and eventually want to write one day. So she's my favorite. And she also has just really creative videos as well.
You were obviously saying earlier you have aspirations of being an author. Do you think you would write a book for young adults based around the tech industry or something completely outside of that? I'm just curious. This just kind of popped in my head.
I wouldn't say I would write anything based on the tech industry, but I definitely have like a few characters floating around in my head who have aspirations to be in the tech industry. So like to be developers or to be designers and things like that.
Maybe you could start a series called the, Looking for the Sorcerer's Keyboard or something like that. And something that's a totally original IP.
Wouldn't that be something? Oh, man, Harry Potter.
Totally original idea, never stolen. So that's a free one for you. I expect a royalty check in the mail. So just saying. If you could have a billboard and have anything you'd want written on it, what would it say and why? So we'll assume that this is in California. It's an 8-lane highway. It's the only thing that's on the horizon. People have to stare at it for 2 hours straight before they move, a quarter of a mile down the road. What would you have on there? Whether it's words, someone before, I think Natalie Spare, she said that she would have skeletons on it with some stuff too. So it's not just limited to words. What would you have on that sort of billboard for some people to see?
Follow Tara Vox on Instagram. I can't even say it with a straight face. Oh my gosh. No, honestly, I probably wouldn't have that just because that would be like too much attention. I would not know what to do. Honestly, it would probably just be pictures of really cute dogs because when you're on the highway, who wants to read a billboard? But if you're looking at cute puppies, it makes it way more bearable.
True. I really like that answer. I never thought of that. Just turn it into the internet. Have it be a rotating gallery of, cute dogs and cute animals.
Yeah.
People would love that. There'd be zero road rage. Cured.
Yes, that would be amazing. Though I do think there might be an increase in accidents because people would be distracted by the cute animals.
Very good point. So, needs more research.
Yes, it does.
So, yeah, I don't really have anything else to bring up unless you have like a hot button issue you want to touch on, get a little more political or anything like that.
I mean, I could always be political. No,
I know. I was somewhat kidding there mostly. I mostly didn't know if you had anything else you wanted to bring up or touch on just kind of before we get into the wrap up.
I guess the only thing that I would say is that if anyone wants to be a programmer or work in the technology industry, just do it. Don't let naysayers tell you not to do it. Just do it anyway.
Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yep. Just do it anyway.
Yeah, I guess in wrapping up, where can people find you? Where are you hosted on these series of tubes we call the internet?
So I'm predominantly on Instagram at TaraVox. So that's TARA.VOX. You can also find me on Medium at TaraVox, TARAVOX. And that's really it. I'm on a few other platforms, but nothing constantly like I am on Instagram or Medium.
What's one question you want to ask the audience? And, we'll leave it here.
What do you want to be known for in 10 years?
If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to Small Talk Tech. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and over at smalltalktech.com. If you like what you've heard, the best way to help us out early on is to leave us a review on iTunes. Finally, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them directly to matt@smalltalktech.com. That's MAT@smalltalktech.com. Thanks again.